The desert stretched endless, a sea of dust and stone baked beneath the merciless Sunday. Allison Hayes, a cowgirl with weathered boots and a spirit as stubborn as the land itself, rode her mare slowly along the ridge. She had been alone for months, working odd ranch jobs, drifting like tumbleweed with no family to anchor her. Loneliness had settled into her bones the way dust settled on her hat. Yet that morning, as the wind carried the faint cries of an animal, something stirred in her heart. She pulled on the reins, ears straining to catch the sound again. Down in a shallow arroyo she spotted movement small, stumbling, fragile. A foal no older than a few weeks stood trembling on wobbly legs. Its ribs showed sharp beneath patchy fur, and its eyes glistened with desperation. The sight cut deep into Allison. She dismounted, boots crunching softly on the gravel. "Well now," she murmured, voice gentle. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The foal's ears flicked, but it didn't flee. Instead, it stumbled toward her, as if every ounce of instinct had been replaced by a plea for help. Allison knelt, hand extended. The foal sniffed, then pressed its soft muzzle against her palm. Heat radiated from its thin body, fragile yet determined. "Poor thing," she whispered, stroking the damp fur between its ears. She scanned the horizon, no sign of a herd, no mare nearby. Coyotes would find it soon if it stayed alone. The thought twisted her gut. She'd lost much in her life, but watching this creature die was something she couldn't allow. "Guess you're mine now," she said softly. The foal nickered weakly, as if sealing the pact. Leading her mare with one hand, she coaxed the foal to follow. At first, it stumbled, nearly collapsing, but it pushed forward, each shaky step fueled by stubbornness. Allison recognized that spirit. She'd walked through her own deserts of grief with the same resolve. By the time they reached her small camp, nestled near a cluster of rocks, the foal was panting but still moving. Allison gave it water in a tin pan, watching as the animal lapped desperately, spilling more than it drank. She smiled faintly, feeling the quiet bond tightening like a lasso around her heart. That night, Allison built a small fire and kept the foal close, tethered gently with a rope but free to rest. It curled beside her saddle as though it had always belonged. The stars stretched wide above, and the desert night hummed with distant coyote calls. Allison lay awake longer than usual, listening to the steady breathing of the foal. She felt something she hadn't in years: responsibility mixed with hope. Life out here was brutal, but it had also given her this fragile creature. She whispered into the dark, "We'll see it through, you and me." Morning painted the horizon in shades of fire and gold. The foal wobbled to its feet, nudging Allison's arm with surprising persistence. She laughed softly. "Hungry, huh?" She poured oats into her palm, letting it nibble clumsily. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. She named it Dusty, for the way its coat seemed kissed by the desert wind. "Dusty Hayes," she joked. The name felt right. As she saddled her mare, Dusty followed closely, tripping over its own legs but unwilling to be left behind. Already, Allison knew this foal wasn't just a burden. It was a companion. The days that followed tested them both. Dusty's legs grew steadier, but his hunger gnawed constantly. Allison rationed her supplies, giving him more than she could spare. Her stomach growled at night, but she never regretted the choice. Each morning, the foal greeted her with bright eyes, following her everywhere like a shadow stitched to her boots. Neighbors in town whispered when they saw her leading a half-dead foal through the streets. "Waste of time," one rancher scoffed. "That thing won't last." Allison just tightened her grip on the rope and kept walking. She'd heard the same words about herself once. Back at her rundown line shack, Allison built a crude pen from scrap wood and wire. Dusty didn't fight the walls. He only looked at her as though she was both fence and freedom. She brushed his coat daily, picking burrs and dust from his mane. humming songs her mother used to sing. Sometimes tears slipped down her cheeks without warning, but Dusty never judged. He simply leaned his small head against her arm, offering comfort in silence. With every passing day, Allison felt less like a drifter and more like someone building roots, no matter how fragile. Summer heat bore down mercilessly, making chores harder. Allison hauled water from the creek twice a day, filling the trough so Dusty could drink his fill. Coyotes circled at night, eyes glowing in the dark. But Huckle, her mare, and Allison herself kept watch. Dusty grew stronger, his legs steadying, his coat smoothing. One morning, she found him trotting circles around the pen, tail high like a banner. Pride swelled in her chest. "Look at you," she whispered, "a fighter after all." She realized then that she wasn't just saving a foal. Dusty was saving her too. Word of Allison's strange companion spread. Some laughed, others shook their heads, but a few neighbors came to see the foal, curiosity softening into admiration. Children giggled as Dusty sniffed their pockets for treats, and old ranchers muttered about spirit. For Allison, it was more than spectacle. It was proof that care and patience could turn weakness into strength. One evening, as she leaned on the fence watching Dusty chase shadows, she felt tears well again. This time, they weren't born of sorrow, but gratitude. The desert had taken much from her, but it had also given her Dusty. Not all attention was kind. A land baron named Silas McCrae, known for cruelty, stopped by one afternoon. He watched Dusty run with narrowed eyes. "That foal's got spirit," he said. "Sell him to me. I'll give you $20. Allison's jaw tightened. "Not for sale." Silas smirked. "Everything's for sale, cowgirl. Best not to get attached." She stood tall, hand resting near her revolver. "Then ride on before you test me." Silas spat in the dirt and left, but his threat lingered. Allison knew men like him didn't forget being denied. Dusty wasn't just a foal, he was a target now. That night, Allison barely slept. She sat on the porch with her rifle across her knees, watching the stars wheel above. Dusty lay curled in the pen, breathing soft, unaware of danger. Allison whispered, "They won't take you, not while I'm breathing." She felt the old ache of loneliness shift into something stronger, purpose. Protecting Dusty meant protecting herself, too. For the first time in years, she wasn't drifting. She was standing her ground. The desert had given her a reason to fight again. And fight she would. Weeks passed, each day binding them closer. Dusty followed Allison even without a rope now, trotting happily beside her mare on short rides. He grew bolder, curious about everything, nipping at saddlebags and chasing grasshoppers. His innocence made Allison laugh, a sound she'd forgotten she could make. But shadows loomed twice. She spotted riders on distant ridges, watching. Silas's men, no doubt. She doubled her patrols, checking fences, setting traps. The shack no longer felt like just shelter. It felt like a fortress for the small family she was building. One evening, a storm rolled across the desert, lightning ripping the sky. Dusty panicked, bolting from the pen, when a board gave way. Allison grabbed her slicker and ran into the rain, shouting his name. The storm swallowed her voice, but she pressed on, heart pounding. She found him trembling in a wash, mud sucking at his legs. "Easy, boy," she called, approaching slow. Lightning flashed, illuminating his wide eyes. She wrapped a rope gently around his neck and coaxed him free, her boots sinking deep. By the time they stumbled back to the shack, both were soaked but alive. After that night, Dusty clung even closer to her. He followed her into the shack, refusing to sleep outside during storms. Allison let him lie on old blankets by the fire, brushing his damp coat until he calmed. As he dozed, she whispered, "Guess you're not just mine. You're family now." The word tasted strange on her tongue, but right. She realized she no longer cried alone in the desert. She had Dusty's trust, his warmth, his unspoken promise to stay. The desert still held danger, but for the first time, Allison felt she could face it with hope. Autumn arrived, painting the mesas gold. Dusty's legs were stronger now, his gait smooth, his spirit undeniable. He ran circles around Huckle, daring the mare to chase. Allison leaned on the fence, pride swelling with every stride. Neighbors stopped by more often, bringing scraps of hay or sugar cubes. Children squealed with delight as Dusty nuzzled their hands. "You've got yourself a real companion," Jensen, an old rancher, said. Allison smiled. "He found me, not the other way around." The truth of that settled deep. Sometimes the desert didn't just take. Sometimes it returned something better. But Silas McCrae returned too. He rode up one afternoon with two men, eyes fixed on Dusty. "That foal's worth more now," he said. $50. Allison stood firm. "He ain't for sale," Silas sneered. "You'll regret that." His men chuckled darkly. Allison's hand hovered near her revolver, but she held her ground. "This land, this foal, they're mine, and you'd best ride on." The standoff stretched, tension crackling like dry brush before a spark. Finally, Silas spat and wheeled his horse. But Allison knew the fight wasn't over. That night, the desert felt uneasy, as if holding secrets. Allison checked her traps twice, her rifle 3 times. Dusty paced in the pen, sensing her worry. She stroked his neck, whispering, "We'll be all right, boy." But deep down, fear coiled in her gut. She'd fought loneliness before, but this was different. This was someone threatening what she loved. And love, she realized, was far heavier than loneliness. She wouldn't let Silas win. Not now, not ever. Morning broke clear, the kind of deceptive beauty the desert loved to show before striking. Allison saddled Huckle and led Dusty out. She needed to show him strength, needed to remind herself, too. Together they rode the boundary, sun glinting off barbed wire, air sharp with promise. Dusty trotted proudly, no longer the fragile foal she'd found, but a creature of spirit and resilience. Allison smiled, heart swelling. "You're more than family now," she whispered. "You're freedom." But freedom always draws envy. As they returned to the shack, Allison spotted dust clouds on the horizon riders, many more than before. Silas was coming, and this time he wasn't offering money. He was coming to take. Allison dismounted, set her jaw, and stroked Dusty's mane. "Stay close, boy. Whatever happens, we face it together." Her hand brushed her rifle, her heart steady now. The desert had given her Dusty, and she would fight tooth and nail to keep him. The horizon burned with dust and danger, but Allison stood ready. The riders came like a dust storm, blurring the horizon with hoofbeats and malice. Silas McCrae led them, his scarred face set in cruel determination. Allison Hayes stood before her shack, rifle steady, Dusty pressed close behind her legs. She had faced loneliness, storms, and hunger, but never an enemy so relentless. Silas reined in, sneering. "Last chance, cowgirl. Hand over the foal, and maybe I'll leave you breathing." Allison's heart pounded, but her voice was iron. "This foal is mine. He chose me, and I'll bury you before I give him up." The line had been drawn. Gunfire shattered the stillness. Allison dropped to one knee, firing back with sharp precision. Bullets ripped splinters from the shack. Dust exploded at her boots. Dusty whinnied, trembling, but didn't bolt. He stayed, as though knowing he belonged at her side. Allison reloaded swiftly, breath steady despite the chaos. The desert echoed with the thunder of hooves, the crack of rifles, the shouts of men. But she wasn't alone anymore. Neighbors who had once doubted her rode in from the ridges, rifles raised. Jensen led them, shouting, "She don't fight alone!" Silas roared in fury, spurring his horse straight toward Allison. She braced, aiming carefully, but Jensen's bullet struck first, grazing Silas's shoulder and sending him reeling. His men faltered, caught between greed and fear. Dusty reared, hooves striking air, his small body fierce despite his youth. The sight burned into Allison's heart. This foal wasn't weak anymore. He was a warrior, as much a part of this fight as she was. She shouted to Wren, the neighbor's daughter helping reload, "Keep him safe!" and stepped into the open, defiance blazing in her eyes. The battle dragged long. Smoke stung Allison's eyes. Her shoulder throbbed from a graze, but she held her ground. One by one, Silas's men broke, retreating into the desert, unwilling to pay with blood. Finally, only Silas remained, wounded but unyielding. He glared at Allison, spitting blood. "This ain't over. That foal's worth more than you'll ever know." Allison lowered her rifle, but kept her aim steady. "He's worth more than you'll ever understand. That's the difference." Silas snarled, then turned his horse and fled, leaving a trail of dust behind. The desert swallowed him whole. When silence finally fell, Allison sank to her knees, exhaustion flooding her body. Dusty pressed his muzzle against her shoulder, warm breath mingling with her tears. She buried her face in his neck, sobbing. "We did it, boy. We held on." Around her, neighbors tended the wounded, but none disturbed her. They knew what this moment meant. She hadn't just defended a foal, she had defended hope, family, and the fragile chance at belonging. Dusty nickered softly, as though answering her heart. In that instant, Allison felt something inside her heal. The days after the fight were filled with rebuilding. Fences were mended, the shack patched, wounds tended. Dusty followed her everywhere, his steps stronger now, his spirit unbroken. Neighbors came often, offering food, supplies, and quiet admiration. Once, a rancher told her, "That foal's more than luck. He's a gift." Allison smiled faintly. "He's family." The word rolled off her tongue naturally now, no longer strange. Each morning, when Dusty trotted at her side, she felt the desert itself nod in approval. She had claimed not just land, but a bond forged in fire. But Silas's words haunted her. "Worth more than you'll ever know." What had he meant? One evening, as Dusty grazed, Allison noticed markings on his flank, faint, almost hidden brands. Her chest tightened. This foal wasn't just a stray. He belonged to a bloodline known for strength, speed, and value. That was why Silas wanted him. But Allison shook her head. "Doesn't matter," she whispered. "You're not theirs. You're mine." She stroked Dusty's mane. Knowing bloodlines meant nothing compared to the bond they shared. Family wasn't branded into hide. It was chosen. Winter returned, sharp and cold. Allison built a stronger barn for Dusty, keeping him warm beside Huckle. At night, she sat by the fire, Dusty's head resting on her lap, his breath steady. She thought of the girl she had been lonely, broken, crying in the desert. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had fought, who had bled, who had chosen to love again. Dusty had given her that chance. She whispered, "I thought I was saving you, but you saved me." The foal stirred, pressing closer, as if to say he understood. As spring bloomed, Dusty grew into a strong, young stallion. His coat gleamed, his muscles rippled with health, his eyes burned with spirit. Allison trained him gently, teaching trust before commands. He followed her voice, her gestures, her heartbeat. Together, they rode across the ridges, wind tearing through her hair, Dusty flying like he was born from the desert itself. Onlookers marveled, but Allison didn't care for their admiration. She cared only for the freedom she felt, the bond unshakable between them. Each stride was proof they were stronger together than they had ever been alone. Still, dangers lingered. Raiders prowled the territory, greed always circling like vultures. But word of Allison's stand spread, turning into legend. The cowgirl who faced Silas for a foal, people whispered in saloons. Some called her foolish, others brave, yet all agreed she was unbreakable. Dusty became part of the tale too, the wild foal who chose a human and refused to leave her side. For Allison, it wasn't legend, it was life. And life, she knew, was worth protecting at any cost. On a quiet evening, Allison sat by the corral, watching Dusty chase fireflies. The desert glowed under the moon, silver and endless. Wren, the neighbor girl who often visited, leaned against her. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" she asked softly. Allison thought for a long moment. "I used to. I wished for easier days, for less pain. But now, no, because without all that, I wouldn't have him." Wren smiled. "And without him, you wouldn't have us." Allison's throat tightened. She realized she wasn't just Dusty's family, she was part of something bigger. As years passed, Dusty grew into legend himself. Children begged for rides. Old men swore they'd never seen such spirit. Allison remained protective, but she shared his story, teaching others the value of patience and love. "You can't break a horse like this," she told young ranchers. "You earn him." They listened, some learning, some not. But Dusty never let anyone forget he was wild once, and he chose to stay. That choice made all the difference. Silas never returned. Rumors spread he'd left the territory, defeated by more than bullets, defeated by the truth he couldn't buy or steal. Allison rarely thought of him now. The desert had its way of erasing men like that, scattering them like dust on the wind. But she never forgot the fight, nor the cost of love. She carried her scars proudly, reminders of the day she stood unbroken, and every time Dusty whinnied at her call, she knew she'd made the right stand. One summer, as the sun burned high, Dusty carried Allison farther than she'd ever dared before. Together they reached a canyon filled with wildflowers, hidden and untouched. She dismounted, letting him graze, and sat among the blooms. For the first time, she felt complete peace. "This is what we fought for," she whispered. "Not land, not pride, just moments like this." Dusty nickered softly, as if agreeing. In that canyon, she felt her soul finally rest. The desert hadn't broken her. 5, 7, Turi. NK. Dusty nickered soft. Dusty nickered soft. It had tested her, shaped her, and ultimately blessed her. Neighbors often asked if she'd sell Dusty now that he was worth a fortune. Each time, she laughed. "Sell him? He's my other half." Money couldn't measure what he gave her: companionship, strength, purpose. She had been a lonely cowgirl once, crying under the desert sky. Now, she was someone who had been chosen by a wild foal. That was a gift no coin could ever buy. On Dusty's 5th year, Allison hosted a small gathering at her ranch. Friends came with food, music, laughter. Children braided flowers into Dusty's mane while he stood patient and proud. Allison watched, heart swelling. She realized she had built more than a home. She had built a community. Wren tugged her sleeve. "He gave you all this," she said, gesturing to the joyful crowd. Allison smiled, tears in her eyes. "Yes, he gave me everything." The desert night filled with song, and for once, Allison felt nothing missing. Seasons turned again, as they always do. Hardships came: drought, sickness, storms, but Allison faced them with steady courage, Dusty always at her side. He had grown strong, but so had she. People no longer saw her as the lonely drifter. They saw her as a woman of grit, the cowgirl who had tamed not just a horse, but her own fate. Legends are born from simple truths. She loved, she fought, she endured. On quiet nights, She still sat on the porch, Dusty grazing nearby. She thought of that first moment, the weak foal stumbling from the arroyo, eyes pleading for help. If she had turned away, both of them would have remained broken. But she hadn't. She had said yes to the burden, yes to the bond, and in saying yes, she had been remade. "Thank you," she whispered often, knowing Dusty gave her back her own soul. Years later, travelers still told the story, how a wild foal followed a cowgirl and refused to leave her side. Some called it fate, others, a miracle. Allison just called it truth. The desert is harsh, but sometimes it delivers gifts hidden in dust and pain. Dusty had been hers, and she had been his. Together, they had carved out more than survival, they had carved out belonging. And so, when the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire, Allison would ride Dusty across the horizon, their silhouettes etched against eternity. People watching from afar swore they looked like one being, rider and horse fused by loyalty. For Allison, it was simpler. She was never alone again. The desert had tested her, but love had saved her. Tears often filled her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the beauty of knowing she had found her family. And it had started with a foal who simply refused to stop following her.